We like to think we've figured it all out. We have LiDAR, carbon dating, and AI to reconstruct the past. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Scattered across the globe are structures and artifacts that make our modern engineering look like child's play. Today, we're not talking about myths or legends. We're talking about cold, hard stone and metallurgical anomalies that, according to everything we know, simply shouldn't exist. From Coral Castle to the lost Labyrinth of Egypt, these are the 10 ancient discoveries modern science still can't explain. Imagine a man who stood barely 5 feet tall, weighed no more than 100 pounds, and had only a 4th-grade education. His name was Edward Leedskalnin. In the early 20th century, in the quiet flatlands of Florida, this frail Latvian immigrant accomplished something that engineers today, with their multi-million-dollar cranes and CAD software, still find profoundly baffling. He built a castle, not out of wood or brick, but out of massive blocks of oolite coral. Over 1,100 tons of rock were moved, carved, and stacked. But here's the kicker. Ed did it all by himself. No heavy machinery, no power tools, and most importantly, no witnesses. He worked almost exclusively at night, under the cover of darkness, and if he sensed someone watching him from the trees, he would simply stop. Let's talk about the impossible features of this place. Take the 9-ton gate. It's a massive block of coral that fits so perfectly into the wall that the gap is barely visible. For decades, tourists could push this multi-ton behemoth open with a single finger. When the bearing finally rusted in the 80s and it took 6 men and a 50-ton crane to fix it, they discovered Ed had drilled a hole through the center of a 9-ton rock with almost laser-like precision, using nothing but a handheld tool. How? Then there's the Polaris telescope. Ed carved a 20-foot-tall, 30-ton rock with a hole perfectly aligned to the North Star. He carved rocking chairs that actually rock, a feast table shaped like Florida, and even a throne for a queen he hoped would one day return to him. All of this from a man suffering from terminal tuberculosis. When people asked him how he did it, Ed didn't talk about pulleys or levers. He simply said, "I have discovered the secrets of the pyramids. I have found out how the Egyptians and the ancient builders in Peru and Asia, with only primitive tools, raised and set in place blocks of stone weighing many tons." He claimed that all matter consists of individual magnets, and that by manipulating these magnetic poles, he could neutralize gravity itself. Modern skeptics will tell you he used clever tripod systems and block-and-tackle gear. And sure, we found some old winches on his property. But those tools don't explain the speed, the silence, or the sheer mathematical perfection of his work. Was Edward Leedskalnin a madman? Or did he truly rediscover a lost harmonic frequency? As we look at these towering coral walls, one thing is certain. Ed took his greatest secret to the grave, leaving us with a monument that defies the very laws of physics we swear by today. Deep in the Dordogne region of southwestern France, there is a doorway that leads not just underground, but 17,000 years back in time. It was discovered in 1940, not by a team of elite archaeologists, but by 4 teenage boys and their dog, Robot. They were looking for a legendary secret tunnel, but what they stumbled upon was far more profound. The Lascaux Caves. Often called the Sistine Chapel of Prehistory, this place is home to over 600 paintings and 1,500 engravings, and it challenges everything we thought we knew about the primitive mind. As you descend into the Great Hall of the Bulls, the first thing that hits you is the scale. These aren't just doodles on a wall. We're looking at massive, 17-foot-long bulls, galloping horses, and stags, all rendered with a level of anatomical precision that is staggering. But here's where the mystery begins. These caves are pitch black. To paint these masterpieces, Paleolithic artists had to use portable sandstone lamps fueled by animal fat. Imagine the scene, flickering, warm light dancing across the uneven limestone walls, making the painted animals appear to breathe, run, and leap in the shadows. It wasn't just art, it was the world's first cinema. But it's the technique that leaves modern scientists scratching their heads. The pigments weren't just rubbed onto the stone. They were complex chemical mixtures of iron oxides and manganese, sometimes even heated to specific temperatures to achieve a particular shade of red or black. They used hollow bird bones to blow pigment onto the walls, an ancient version of the airbrush. And they didn't just paint what they saw, they used the natural contours of the rock to give the animals 3D volume. A bulge in the wall becomes the muscular shoulder of a bison. A crack in the stone becomes the line of a horse's back. The deeper you go, the stranger it gets. We reach the shaft of the dead man. Here, tucked away in a nearly inaccessible part of the cave, is a scene unlike any other. A man with a bird-like head falling backward before a disemboweled bison. It is a narrative, a story, perhaps a shamanic vision. Why put it there in the most difficult spot to reach? And then there is the celestial connection. Some researchers have noticed that the dots and positions of the animals at Lascaux align perfectly with ancient star maps. The eyes of the bulls might represent the Pleiades. The positions of the horses might track the summer solstice. Were these cavemen actually sophisticated astronomers? Today, the original Lascaux is sealed off forever to protect it from the very air we breathe. We've built high-tech replicas, but the soul of the cave remains locked in the dark. It stands as a silent reminder that our ancestors weren't just survivors. They were visionaries, dreamers, and masters of a craft that we are still trying to fully decode 17 millennia later. In the middle of the Pacific Ocean, thousands of miles from the nearest continent, sits a tiny speck of land known as Rapa Nui, or Easter Island. It is home to nearly 900 monolithic statues called Moai. These silent giants, with their long faces and brooding expressions, have fascinated the world for centuries. But for a long time, we were looking at them all wrong. We thought they were just heads, until excavations revealed they have massive, hidden bodies buried deep beneath the volcanic soil. But even more baffling than their bodies are their hats. Perched precariously on top of some moai are massive cylinders of red volcanic stone called pukao. These aren't just small decorations. Some of these red hats weigh up to 13 tons, the weight of 2 full-grown African elephants. And they aren't made of the same gray stone as the statues. They were carved in a completely different quarry on the other side of the island. So here is the mystery. How did a civilization with no wheels, no draft animals, and limited timber move a 13-ton crown across miles of rugged volcanic terrain? And more importantly, how did they lift it onto the head of a statue that stands over 30 feet tall? For years, the world believed the Rapa Nui people were primitive. But the Pukao tell a different story. To get these hats into place, the islanders didn't just use brute force. They used sophisticated physics. Recent archaeological experiments suggest they might have used a technique called parbuckling. Imagine a long ramp made of dirt and stone leading to the statue's head. By wrapping ropes around the red cylinder and pulling from the top of the ramp, they could roll the hat up the incline with a fraction of the effort needed to lift it vertically. But even with parbuckling, the precision required is mind-blowing. The pukao has a small indentation on the bottom to fit perfectly onto the moai's head. There was no room for error. One slip and the masterpiece and the workers would be crushed. And why red? Why go to all that trouble for a different color of stone? To the Rapa Nui, red was a sacred color, associated with mana, a spiritual power. These hats weren't just fashion, they were symbols of status, power, and a connection to the divine. When you stand at the foot of a moai wearing its red pukao, you realize that the Rapa Nui weren't just survivors on a lonely island. They were master engineers and navigators of the soul. They didn't see a 13-ton rock as an impossibility. They saw it as a vessel for their ancestors' power. Today, as the salt air slowly erodes these giants, we are left to wonder, what other secrets are buried in the red dust of Rapa Nui? When the ancient Greeks gazed upon the massive fortifications of Mycenae and Tiryns, they didn't see the work of architects or masons. They saw the handiwork of giants, specifically the one-eyed Cyclopes. This is how these structures earned the name, Cyclopean walls. And once you stand at the foot of one, you'll understand why the myth was easier to believe than the reality. We are looking at limestone boulders so immense that some weigh over 20 tons. But it's not just the weight, It's the fit. This is polygonal masonry. Unlike modern brickwork where every piece is a uniform rectangle, these stones are irregular, multi-sided shapes that interlock like a giant, three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle. There is no mortar, no cement, no glue, just the sheer force of gravity and a level of carving precision that defies logic for a Bronze Age civilization. In some places, these walls are over 20 feet thick. To build them, the Mycenaeans had to quarry these behemoths, transport them up steep, rugged hillsides, and then, this is the part that baffles engineers, lift them into perfect vertical alignment. If a single stone was off by a fraction of an inch, the entire structural integrity of the interlocking system would fail. Modern architects call this seismic-resistant engineering. Because the stones aren't glued together, they can actually dance or shift slightly during an earthquake, absorbing the energy without collapsing. It's a technology we are still trying to perfect today, yet it was mastered over 3,000 years ago by people we often label as primitive. So, how did they do it? Some skeptics suggest massive earthen ramps and thousands of laborers. But the logistics of moving a 20-ton block up a 30-degree incline on a muddy hillside are nightmarish. There are no marks of iron tools on these stones, and no evidence of the advanced cranes we would use today. Was there a lost technology involving sound or vibration to soften the stone? Or did they possess a mechanical understanding of leverage that has since been forgotten? As we run our fingers over the cold, seamless joints of a Cyclopean wall, the myth of the giants starts to feel a little less like a fairy tale, and a lot more like a coded memory of a high-tech past. In 2001, a team of marine engineers using advanced sonar technology were surveying the ocean floor off the coast of the Guanahatabibes Peninsula in Cuba. They were looking for sunken treasure ships, but what they found on their monitors was far more staggering. At a depth of over 2,000 feet, they saw symmetrical, geometric shapes, giant blocks, pyramids, and circular structures that looked like a sprawling urban complex. This is the underwater city of Cuba, and it shouldn't be there. The images captured by the remotely operated vehicles, or ROVs, show smooth, white stones that appear to be cut granite. Some of the blocks are huge, over 16 feet long, and they are arranged in patterns that resemble streets, plazas, and foundations. To the human eye, it looks unmistakably like a city. But to a geologist, it's a nightmare. Here's why. The depth. At 2,000 feet below sea level, these structures would have had to be above water at some point for humans to build them. But according to our current understanding of Earth's history, the last time that specific area of the ocean floor was dry land was at least 50,000 years ago. 50,000 years. To put that in perspective, the Great Pyramid of Giza is only about 4,500 years old. If these are man-made, it means a sophisticated civilization existed tens of thousands of years before we thought humans even knew how to farm, let alone carve granite and build cities. Some scientists argue it must be a natural geological formation, a freak of nature where the limestone has fractured into perfect 90-degree angles. But the symmetry is haunting. The structures are aligned in a way that mimics the cardinal directions, much like the pyramids on land. Because of the extreme depth and the high cost of deep-sea exploration, research has stalled. The site remains a silent, dark enigma at the bottom of the Atlantic. Is it a lost chapter of human history, a Caribbean Atlantis that sank during a massive tectonic shift, or is it just a trick of the light and stone? Until we can send a manned mission to those crushing depths, the pyramids of Cuba will remain one of the ocean's most guarded secrets. Deep beneath the towering temple of the feathered serpent in Mexico, there is a world that was never meant to be seen by the living. In 2003, after a heavy rainstorm, archaeologists discovered a small sinkhole that led to a sealed 330-foot-long tunnel. This wasn't just a hallway, it was a physical representation of the underworld, crafted nearly 2,000 years ago. As researchers moved deeper into the dark, they found something that seemed like science fiction. The walls and ceiling of the tunnel were meticulously coated with a powder made of pyrite, also known as fool's gold. When you walk through with a torch, The glinting metal reflects the light, creating the illusion of walking through a subterranean galaxy. Above you, a sky of golden stars. Below you, something even more bizarre. At the very end of the tunnel, archaeologists discovered miniature landscapes with mountains and valleys. And in those valleys sat pools of liquid mercury. Think about that for a second. Mercury is a highly toxic, heavy metal. It doesn't occur naturally in large liquid pools. To the people of Teotihuacan, this shimmering silver liquid might have represented a sacred river, a path for the dead, or a mirror to the cosmos. But the technical question is, how did they mine it? How did they transport it without poisoning everyone involved? And why go to such extreme lengths to create a landscape that was sealed off with boulders and never intended to be visited again? But the mysteries don't stop at the chemistry. Inside this tunnel, they found thousands of extraordinary objects: jade statues, giant conch shells, and even mysterious clay spheres covered in yellow jarosite. We have no idea what these spheres were for. They aren't tools, they aren't weapons, they are anomalies. Was this tunnel a laboratory for early alchemy, or was it a ritual machine designed to transform a king into a god? To this day, the main chambers of Teotihuacan remain unexcavated, and the toxic mercury vapors make further exploration dangerous. The city of the gods is still keeping its most profound secrets buried in the silver shadows of the earth. In 1974, a group of farmers, digging a well near Xi'an, China, struck something hard. They thought it was an old brick or a piece of pottery. What they had actually found was the vanguard of an 8,000-man army that had been standing in battle formation underground for over 2,000 years. This is the silent guard of Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China. At first glance, the sheer scale is what takes your breath away. 8,000 soldiers, 130 chariots, and 670 horses, each one life-sized and each one unique. No two faces are the same. It's as if the emperor's entire personal guard was frozen in clay to protect him in the afterlife. But as archaeologists began to clean the dust of centuries off their weapons, they found something that defied the laws of time. They found thousands of bronze swords, spears, and crossbow bolts. And despite being buried in damp earth for 2,200 years, the blades were still shiny, razor-sharp, and, most importantly, completely free of rust. How is that possible? When scientists took these weapons to the lab, they discovered a thin layer of chromium oxide coating the surface of the bronze. Now here's the kicker. Chromium plating is a highly advanced process that wasn't patented in the West until 1937. Somehow, the metallurgists of the Qin dynasty were using a form of chemical chrome plating more than 2 millennia before the Industrial Revolution. But the mystery goes even deeper. The crossbows found with the army were mechanized marvels, capable of piercing through contemporary armor. The parts were standardized, meaning if a trigger broke in the heat of battle, a soldier could swap it with a spare part from another unit. This level of mass production and interchangeable parts is something we thought was invented in the 18th century. Was this just a stroke of luck, or did the ancient Chinese possess a lost manual of high-tech manufacturing? To this day, the emperor's actual tomb remains unopened, protected by legends of booby traps and, interestingly enough, rivers of liquid mercury, much like we saw in Teotihuacan. What other technologies are waiting for us inside that sealed mound? The Terracotta Army isn't just a funeral rite, it's a high-tech fortress frozen in time. Long before the first stone was laid for the Great Pyramid, and long before Stonehenge was even a thought, a mysterious civilization on the island of Malta was moving boulders the size of houses. These are the megalithic temples of Malta, complexes like Gigantia and Mnidra that date back over 5,500 years. To the local people of later generations, these structures were so massive that they believed only giants could have moved the stones. But as we look closer, we realize that the people who built these weren't just strong, they were master acousticians. Take, for example, the Halsaflieni hypogeum, a massive underground labyrinth carved directly into the limestone. Inside, there is a specific chamber known as the Oracle Room. If a man with a deep voice speaks into a small niche in the wall, his voice resonates throughout the entire complex. But it's not just an echo. Modern acoustic testing has revealed something startling. The chambers are tuned to a frequency of 110 Hz. Why is that significant? Because 110 Hz is the exact frequency that has been shown to shift human brain activity. When people are exposed to this specific resonance, the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for logical processing, deactivates, and the areas associated with emotional processing and trance states turn on. Were these temples actually ancient neuroengineering labs? Was the architecture designed specifically to induce a mass religious ecstasy or a collective vision? And then there's the astronomical precision. At the Mnadra temple during the spring and autumn equinoxes, the sun's rays pass through the main doorway and align perfectly with a specific stone altar deep inside the temple. It is a solar clock of incredible accuracy, built by a culture that, on paper, shouldn't have had the mathematical tools to calculate the tilt of the Earth's axis. Perhaps the most chilling part of the story is how it ends. After 1,500 years of building these sophisticated acoustic stone cathedrals, the temple builders of Malta simply disappeared. No signs of war, no mass graves, no evidence of plague. They left their giant stones and their haunting frequencies behind, and the island went silent for centuries. Were they victims of an environmental collapse, or did they simply move on to a different frequency of existence? For centuries, the Labyrinth of Egypt was considered a myth, a tall tale told by ancient Greek historians like Herodotus and Strabo. They described a colossal two-story structure with 3,000 rooms, half of them underground and half above. Herodotus claimed he walked through the upper chambers himself, described as a dizzying network of winding passages and courts so complex that no stranger could find their way out without a guide. But for 2,000 years, there was nothing but sand. Modern archaeologists found the pyramid of Amenemhat III at Hawara, but the legendary labyrinth, it seemed to have vanished from the face of the earth. That was until 2008. An expedition known as the Mataha expedition arrived at Hawara, not with shovels, but with ground-penetrating radar. What they found beneath the surface sent shockwaves through the archaeological community. The scans revealed a massive grid of stone walls, several meters thick, forming a giant rectangle of 304 by 244 meters. The data showed distinct chambers, hallways, and massive stone slabs. It wasn't just a building, it was the foundation of the labyrinth, exactly where the ancients said it would be. So why haven't you seen this on the evening news? Here's the mystery. Shortly after the discovery, the Egyptian authorities halted the project. The findings were never officially published in major scientific journals, and the site was essentially left untouched. What is down there that they aren't ready for us to see? The ancient texts say the lower chambers contain the tombs of the 12 kings who built it, along with the remains of sacred crocodiles. But they also hint at archives of the gods, knowledge from a time before the dynastic Egyptians. Is it possible that the labyrinth is a giant time capsule? A library of a lost civilization protected by its own complexity? Every year, the rising groundwater in the Fayum region threatens to destroy these chambers before we ever get a chance to open them. We are standing on the roof of the greatest library in human history, yet we are still waiting for the key to turn the lock. Finally, we travel high into the Andes Mountains of Bolivia, nearly 13,000 feet above sea level, to a place that looks like a giant's toy box was scattered across the plateau. This is Puma Punku. At first glance, it looks like a field of broken stone, but when you look closer, you realize these aren't just rocks. They are pieces of a modular building system so advanced, it shouldn't exist in the ancient world. The stones at Puma Punku are made of red sandstone and andesite. Now, andesite is an incredibly hard volcanic rock. To cut it, you normally need diamond-tipped tools. Yet the blocks here feature perfectly straight edges, internal 90-degree angles, and drill holes that are uniform in depth and diameter. Some of the cuts are so clean and precise that they look like they were made with a high-powered laser or a CNC machine. The most famous features are the H-blocks. These are massive, interlocking stones carved into the shape of the letter H with such mathematical precision that they are interchangeable. This is modular construction, the same principle we use today for skyscrapers and Lego bricks. But the Tiwanaku culture, who officially built this site, supposedly had no writing system and no iron tools. So how did they carve a groove only a few millimeters wide into one of the hardest stones on Earth? The mystery gets heavier, literally. One of the stone slabs at Puma Punku weighs over 131 tons. There are no trees at this altitude to make wooden rollers, and the oxygen is so thin that even basic manual labor is exhausting. Yet these stones were transported from a quarry miles away and fitted together so tightly that you can't even slide a razor blade between them. But the real shocker is the magnetism. Some of the stones at Puma Punku exhibit strange magnetic anomalies. If you bring a compass near certain carved edges, the needle spins wildly. This suggests that the stones were subjected to intense heat or energy during the carving process. Or perhaps they were part of a larger machine we don't yet understand. Is Puma Punku the ruins of a pre-cataclysmic civilization? A place where stone was molded like clay using lost harmonic or thermal technology? As we leave this high-altitude enigma, we have to ask, was our past much more industrial than our history books dare to admit? So, after traveling from the coral towers of Florida to the magnetic ruins of Puma Punku, what have we actually learned? We've seen stones that defy gravity, iron that refuses to rust, and acoustic chambers that can literally alter the human brain. The evidence is carved in granite and cast in bronze. Our ancestors weren't just struggling to survive, they were masters of a high-tech world we are only now beginning to rediscover. The takeaway here isn't that aliens built the pyramids or that magic moved the Moai. The real takeaway is much more humbling. History isn't a straight line of progress. We like to think we are at the pinnacle of human achievement, but these 10 discoveries prove that we've forgotten more than we know. Perhaps the greatest mystery isn't how they built these wonders, but why we lost the knowledge to do it ourselves. We are a species with amnesia, standing on the shoulders of giants we no longer recognize. So the next time you look at a modern skyscraper, remember, the stones of the past are still speaking. The question is, are we finally brave enough to listen?